But we're coming back to fitness. We're going to do our series on fitness, and then we're going to be preparing for our session on Lent. I mean, we have Ash Wednesday in 2 weeks, I think, 3 weeks. It's really, really early for this year. In fact, Easter is probably going to be downright cold. It's actually in March. But the areas of fitness we talked about spiritual, and we said we're going to talk about financial, we're going to talk about physical, and we're going to talk about relationships. Well, today is the ugly one, the financial. And it seems interesting because it's kind of neat for me because I could go back and address this really different because it wasn't long ago that I did a session on that. And it's only been a month or two, I think, and I said, I can look at this a different way. We can look at this a lot more biblical and structure our understanding of what is biblical in fitness in our finances, and not just how to do it. Now, I said I could reference you. I could tell you to go to Dave Ramsey. I could tell you to go listen to his lectures on YouTube, get his books, and do some things like that. But this morning, it's more about what makes Christian fitness different than secular, and that's the message that we're hearing in Luke this morning. One of the things that you're hearing, it's really interesting because there's actually, the text can be broken down into two parts. Verses 1 to 8 is the actual parable. That's the actual story that Jesus is saying. He talks that Jesus told his disciples there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. Now, bear in mind, we'll come back to this in just a little bit, it says wasting his possessions. He never said that this manager was cheating him. There's a big difference. He just wasn't really good at what he was supposed to be good at. So the manager called him and they asked him, what is this that I hear about you? Give an account of your management. In other words, tell me how you're running the business. Because it doesn't sound like it's really going well. Tell me what's actually going on. And then the manager, he said to him, what shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. My gosh, boy, isn't that what often happens? That somebody calls you in for the kids. If mommy and daddy say, hey, I need to see you, it's like, oh crap. If your boss says, hey, I need to talk to you, oh my. And more often than not, it probably is average to less than average news than it is good news. But it doesn't mean the hammer is going to fall. It sometimes simply means that we talk to our kids, hey, I got a call from your teacher today, and you know what, you haven't turned in a couple assignments. It doesn't mean I'm going to ground you for a month yet. However, you have 2 days to get this homework done, and if you don't, at that point, I will ground you for a month. And what happened here is the servant, the worker, immediately jumped to conclusions. He doesn't like the way I'm running the business, he's going to fire me. Immediately flipped, he just flipped. And the manager said to him, what shall I do now? My master's taken away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. He says, I know what I'll do. And he said, when I lose my job here, then people will welcome me. So that's what he did. He looked at all their debts, and he said, all right, if you owe $100, I'm going to cut it to $60. However, when I get fired in a week, then you need to let me stay at your house. It was that kind of stuff. So that's the parable. This is the point. And then it goes on in the parable part in verses 1 to 8, and 8 would have ended with the idea that the master found out that he was cheating. He wasn't cheating before. He just wasn't doing a good job. Now he's cheating. And surprise, surprise, the master goes, wow, you did a good job. That's really shrewd. That's pretty good that you figured it out. And here's the issue to finances for us. The master follows up and he says, the master commended the dishonest the manager because he acted shrewdly. He says, for the people of this world, outside of the church, outside of Christianity, are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are people of the light of the church. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself, so that when it's gone, you will be welcome to eternal dwellings. And use your worldly wealth to be welcomed to eternal dwellings. Do you hear the parable here? What you got now has to do with what you'll have a billion years from now in eternity. It doesn't mean that everything you do good will be rewarded here. It means that as Christians, our lives should be different. They should be different. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than the people within the faith. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Whoever is dishonest with very little will be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling your worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you've not been trustworthy with someone else's stuff, then who will give you stuff of their own to take care of? No one can serve two masters. So 1 to 8 is the parable. The application was 9 to 13. So it told us a story, and then we hear what's going to happen with how we manage that. So Jesus is speaking to his disciples, and you get the impression it's the disciples, but listen to verse 16 and 14. It states that the Pharisees heard all these things and ridiculed Jesus. The Pharisees. Oh, I didn't know he was talking to them too. Well, yeah, it appears that Jesus made a comment here, and we miss it. It's just a small word, and he says in verse 1, let's go back, and Jesus also told his disciples. Also means that he was talking to them. In chapter 15, he had gone through a litany of parables, and he was making reference to the parables that he had just told them. The whole chapter, there's three parables in 15. And he's going through them, and he says he also told his disciples about this situation, about having worldly things to manage and what to do with them. He was addressing the parable for the benefit of the disciples, but in a not so subtle way, he was addressing the Pharisees, because they were the ones, they were the folks, like we may say about our government today, all they care about is money. Just follow the money, and you'll find out why somebody voted for Bill A or Bill B, or why they voted against it. Follow the money. And it's not always directly to their pocket, but it is indirectly, because it's to their campaign fund. But it's in that if I'm the senator from Maryland and I vote for such and such, then more money will come to Maryland. Well, what does that do for me? Does it put money in my pocket? No. But it does allow people to like me more, and therefore I have done what that servant did. I rearranged the money so people would take care of me later. And that's what's happening. And so he's talking to them, because the Pharisees were doing that even then. This is not a new problem in government. Unfortunately, it has grown way bigger because we have worldwide access to information. So here's the information that's coming down. He says those who were the Pharisees were those who were lovers of money and justified themselves before men, and who exalted that which was an abomination before God. So with that as a backdrop, that's how we're looking at this parable. The parable itself is sort of simple. You go, well, it doesn't seem that complicated. And yet it's a little unorthodox, because normally Jesus makes the protagonist is the representative of God or Christ, and or some other positive individual. But in this case, all the characters are wicked. All of them. Nobody's really good in this story. And the point was that the steward and the man, his possessions that he managed, are both unsavory. I mean, the owner was kind of putting the pressure on him because he didn't like the way he was running the business, which is okay, but the sense is he wasn't doing it in a very kind way. Said he was the boss that was just, you know what, you gotta make more money for me. I don't like the way you're doing it. But this should alert us to the fact that Jesus is not telling us to emulate either one of these folks. He is not telling us to be the hard-nosed boss, and he's not telling us to cheat our boss so we'll be in good shape later. That is not the message. And I've heard people go, oh, see, even Jesus said it's okay, I can skim a little bit from the business, and because they got plenty of money. That's not what Christians do with their finances. The parable begins with that rich man calling the steward to let him know. The steward then, he mismanages. Both are wrong. The shrewdness part is what's amazing. Is the master, God, is kind of saying, people of the world do a real good job of managing their finances. They're very shrewd. They figure out how they can align more money and they can align more resources and take care of themselves and others sort of at the same time on how they can work it out. And then he says, but yet the people of the church or of the light, they're kind of out there either on one or two ends we tend to fall. We tend to fall in the end that, finances are here and God is over here and they never mix. Or there are those folks who go, everything belongs to God, I don't really care, and then they make no effort to save a penny. And somebody will take care of me. Somebody will take care of me. It's like my friends say about motorcycle laws, wearing helmets. They said it should be wonderful. You don't want to wear a helmet in America? Don't wear a helmet. The trouble is, though, in our society, it means that you're deciding that you're going to that if you get injured, somebody else will pay for it. That's the problem. And that's what they're saying here is there's two characters, and God's not saying either one is right. In his book, The Scandal of Evangelical Conscience, called Why Are Christians, called The Scandal of Evangelical Conscience, Why Are Christians Living Just Like the Rest of the World? Said Ron Sider asked, why are Christians living like the rest of the world? That's exactly what he says is, he says, because in reality, our divorce rate, our sexual disobedience rate, our domestic abuse rate, and even our finances, unfortunately, are not severely different from non-believers. Now, this is where we talk about becoming fit in finances through this, because we had two bad ways of managing money, or mammon, as the other translation was. In other words, our professions and our use of money seem to be the same as unbelievers. Can you tell the difference? Can you look around at Christians and can you pick one out by how they manage their mammon, their money, their resources? It's interesting. A few nights ago, I think it was the night we were driving into the hospital, and I was listening to Dr. Tony Evans on the way home, and his message to me related to what I was saying. So I kind of inserted this, and it says he said, Abraham and Isaac present how we manage what God gives us. You remember the story? It said Abraham, very, very old man. Sarah, very, very old, never had children. God says, I'm going to give you a child. Right, sure. You're going to give us a child, and it's going to become the population of the whole world, the whole kingdom. But after Isaac is born, what does God tell him to do with Isaac? He tells him to take him to the mountain, build an altar, and sacrifice him. Oh, the non-believers love this one on us. They love to come in and go, yeah, God is a gory, bloody, nasty, evil God. Question, did Abraham sacrifice Isaac? No. Oh, but he wanted... No. God provided. And Dr. Tony Evans, he went on with the whole explanation about what the name of the place means and all of this. And it meant God will provide. God provided a ram. God provided opportunities. God then provided and fulfilled. What he realized that he had was, though, Abraham's money was Isaac. The question to us is, what is our Isaac? Isaac was the most important thing in the world that Abraham had. His whole life had changed, and now as an old man, he had a child. Some of us may have had a child late in life, or some of us who are grandparents know that we were probably a little bit more lenient, a little bit more protective of our grandkids, maybe we were, than our kids, and we kind of lock onto that. So Abraham was locking onto Isaac, and maybe, we don't know, but maybe God was saying, do you still see me? Or are you so wrapped up in this new baby, this new child I gave you, that you're missing my message? Are you willing to give me Isaac? Not to die, necessarily, but are you willing to give me Isaac? So the question to us in our finances, what's our Isaac? Are we willing to give it to God? God provided for Abraham and will for us. And again, it does not mean that I'm condoning helter-skelter. We have retirement accounts. Is it as much as it's supposed to be? No. But we're making an effort, trying. That's a biblical thing that we should do. You know? So Sider writes, though, in his book, he goes on and he writes, our motivation should be different. In other words, you know, if God is the owner of our finances, our motivation should be different. For the Christian, he says, wealth is something that we are entrusted with. Christians are motivated by a desire to use resources that God has given us for his glory. So what's your motivation with your finances? And then he continues, he says, our goals should be different. The goals for our money should be different. All of our dealings and all of our interactions with money are tempered with an understanding that there is an eternity beyond this, that we are going to live beyond the grave. Wealth is a blessing and is of some value, but the wise Christian knows the limitations of money. It doesn't go beyond the grave. But wealth is a blessing. Wealth is not evil. We've talked about this. He goes on, he says, our mindset should be different. He says, we seek contentment with finances. Money seeks to grip its talons deep into all of us, particularly in our society. But as Christians, we seek to free ourselves of that race, and he says, the pursuit of that quest. He says, instead, we seek to be content with what we have. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to live in a one-room little apartment or shed all of your life. That again is not what God is saying. However, let's take a quick look, and I didn't get to hear it, but while I was gone, apparently, or right after I was coming in, that Buck Showalter, the manager of the Orioles, apparently had a meeting with Chris Davis, who had been offered $150 million for 7 years, and it's just dragging on and dragging on. And he went to Chris and he says, Chris, is there anything at Target that you can't buy? Wow. And probably said, in fact, you could probably buy the store. Not all of them, but one. Is there anything at Target you can't buy? This is the contentment we're talking about. At what point, you know, and maybe you're fortunate, maybe you're the person in your family who needs enough money to make sure all the family is taken care of. Got it. So you're going to need more money. Got it. Understood. You need more money to take care of things in Maryland than you do in Wyoming. You watch the HGTV shows, and you can watch Joe and her buddy in Texas in Waco, and they buy houses for $180,000, 2,200 square foot homes. I don't care if they need renovations or not. You can't buy a shed in Jessup for that kind of money. But our mindset has to be different. Our worth is not defined by what we own, but by our owner. Our management is different. Christian budgets ought to have different line items. One of them should be the giving, offering, tithe line. Non-believers don't have that line. Spending ought to progressively become less and less self-centered and more God-centered to bless others. Society wants us to believe that our finances are all ours, that there's a line. I talked about it before. There's finances and then God, and they're separate, and they're not. But even facing unemployment, at what point does it become unethical? In our scripture today, it became okay to cheat the master so you could take care of yourself. So if you were facing unemployment, is it okay to steal? Our society is saying yes. Somewhere back in the 80s or 90s, it became okay to steal or beat up for a pair of tennis shoes or an athletic coat because it wasn't fair that they had and you didn't. That's where the line began to blur. All of a sudden, Christians, non-Christians all look alike. What's the difference? The difference is that yes, even facing unemployment, stealing is a sin. Like it or not, it's a sin. Thou shalt not steal except when I needed a stick. Except when somebody had so much that they could afford to let me have it. There's no qualifications there. If your finances need to be fit for God, if your finances aren't fit for God, then the rest of your life is going to be unfit for God. You can't live as a disciple of Christ without reorienting yourself. We find some of us, we find a way we get, we come to Christ and we realize, okay, maybe I got to clean up my language, or maybe I, said I got to stop cheating on my taxes, or I got to stop, whatever it is in your life, whatever your Isaac is, you got to give it to God. And that was the message. God wants us to be content. And in that, there are some things that we have to put in place. Is our life based on prayer? Do we pray for God's guidance before we just go, I'm going. I'm doing it because it's what I want to do. So God wants us to be content. Are we content with what we have? And again, I understand if you're deep in debt, you're battling out, all that, God's not saying just stay there in debt. He's not saying, oh, well, just be content with what you have. You should be trying to get out of that. Sure you should. Or you need a little safer place to live because the place that you're living is not in a great neighborhood. None of that was part of what God is saying. It says, are you able to be content? Even in your struggles in life, whether it be with money or whatever, can you be content? Because, the bottom line, who's in control? God. If you know that God is in control, then you can be content where you are, even though your goal is to be somewhere else. Or are you so uncontent that you decide, well, I just got to have all that cable bill. I know I don't make as much as what those folks do, but everybody's got 4 boxes in their house, super high def, in all the surround sound and everything else. I know I don't make that kind of money, but it's just not fair that I can't have that. And everybody's got an unlimited data plan that lets them go on their cell phone forever and ever, do all these kind of things, even though I don't make that kind of money. But it's just not fair. Do you know those people? I see a lot of the young people I deal with are that way. Wow. But everybody's got this cell phone. But you don't work. You're 16. 1 Timothy 8:6. Godliness with contentment is a great gain. Are you free from greed? Do you give thanks? Like any kind of fitness, sometimes less is more. A few less calories means that your mobility is going to improve. In fact, Paul writes, make it your mission to lead a quiet life, mind your own business, and work with your hands just as we were told, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders. Being your own person doesn't mean that you depend on anybody, including Mr. and Mrs. MasterCard, Visa, Comcast, AT&T, and Mr. and Mrs. Bank. As Christians, it's biblical to spend less than you earn. It's biblical to avoid the use of debt. It's biblical to prepare for a rainy day, maybe 1 to 2 months of your normal expenses. It's biblical to save and invest, the parable of the sower. It's biblical to give. Yes, tithing is listed in the Bible. No, you're not going to hell because you're not tithing. but it gives us a goal, an objective, a challenge. It's not a measure of heaven and hell. That's wrong too. It's biblical to use your money to give Caesar what is his, like it or not. Now, set up a plan. You can pay as little taxes as possible, but it should be legal. 7, it's biblical to be selective with how you spend on your lifestyle. To be physically fit, you often have to leave it all in the field. You really have to work out hard at the gym. You just can't go and sit and pedal and read a book. It just doesn't work. The same in our fitness, in our relationships, and in our finances. We have to accept the fact that we're not in charge of it. It belongs to God, and we give it over to Him. Amen? Amen. Let's join in singing our last song, number 2129.